I don't know what your policies are for cell phones or technology in your house, but sometimes it's really helpful to think through really a digital decorum. What is the decorum, the way that we operate in our homes, but even outside of our homes with different technologies? Thinking through this can be really helpful and can shine some light into dark places, maybe even inside of ourselves, but also for sure inside of the world that our kids are living in. Well, today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in our daily segment, Face in the Dark, Dr. Kathy's going to talk a little bit about a new bill that's been proposed where the government is starting to think through what kinds of ethics should we have as we approach AI, and how can we enable everyone to have access to AI. But maybe the most important thing that Dr. Kathy talks about is how families can start to establish a family code of conduct, especially with artificial intelligence. It's going to be really insightful, and I'm thankful that you're here with us today on the Celebrate Kids podcast.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, over the holidays, we may not have recognized this story that came down, but on December 15th, lawmakers introduced a bipartisan Artificial Intelligence Literacy Act. Many have described what's being called the AI Literacy Act as fairly straightforward. It supposedly aims to, one, classify AI as a necessary part of digital literacy, and then make AI literacy accessible through public schools, colleges, universities, and libraries. The first part of the Literacy Act may require an amendment to the Digital Equity Act of 2021, which defines digital literacy and identifies arenas that need addressing to help close what's being called the digital divide. That means that some people have access to digital technologies and others don't. Once AI is established as something that people should be equitably educated about, and focuses on five main areas: skills, which are defined as understanding the concept, application limitations, as well as the ethical issues AI creates, such as potential infringement or misinformation. Competition is another one. It's a big part of the AI Literacy Act. It's making sure that the United States stays technologically competitive and is digitally prepared as AI continues to grow. Another one is education, that through a grant program, public schools and institutions of higher learning will incorporate hands-on learning, including through private sector partnerships and in-school labs and virtual learning platforms. Another one is equity, that the AI Literacy Act is actually an intentionally aimed at fostering digital equity, making sure that this knowledge and this ability to this technology is equally attainable to different races and ethnic groups and geopolitical groups and to different socioeconomic groups. The last one is accountability, that if this is implemented, the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information will be required to submit a written report every year that includes recommendations for changes that might benefit more people. With generative AI's rapid growth over the year, becoming AI literate is something that we're really kind of all in the process of learning. And this AI Literacy Act is kind of putting it into legislation that we should know about this. So, Dr. Kathy, what do you make of this push to legislate the education of AI?
I do think that there could be value here. AI is here to stay, and it does make a lot of us nervous. I was up at my publisher. Back in November of 23, I had a meeting with my publishing team up in Chicago. I'm an author with Moody and thrilled to be so. And one of the questions I asked the head of publishing was, were they developing an AI policy? And I was glad to hear that they were. And he was explaining to me how they can use different search engines or whatever they would be, certain mechanisms to determine if someone has used AI. And I was happy to hear that because I work hard at writing my books and I don't use AI. And I frankly don't want somebody else doing it, because I have ethical issues. So I am glad it's happening. I know we're going to talk about more, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I think that's really important to kind of highlight that this is something that's coming through all industries.
Yeah.
And education is one of many. But I guess I don't really understand this kind of approach to education. I mean, I understand that the government has a vested interest in education and educating the people, the citizenry. I mean, Benjamin Rush, and there's many others, they kind of felt education was really important because it shaped people to be really fit for community and be part of kind of an elected governance, that we should know how things operate and know how to kind of engage them. But to ask a higher level question here, how do you think that we should engage things like this when legislators really work to shape, or I would maybe even say, because of my like leanings, impose certain teachings and specific ideas about different types of technology to our kids? I mean, I don't love AI. I don't love the idea that we're going to allow this to happen, but I realize that it's all around me every day, from my search engine to my cell phone to even turning my car on and recognizing that I don't have to think about the heat sometimes. It just goes on automatically. There's artificial intelligences kind of all around me. But I want to know, when people kind of in some of these other seats dictate to kind of our kids, should we have kind of an ethic about that, or maybe even an ethic about what education should be and maybe where this should come from? I mean, should we kind of push back on this, or should we kind of say, no, this makes sense, and our educators, our legislators should be pushing our education institutions to consider this? What do you think about that?
Yes, yes, and no, no. I mean, it's a complex issue, my friend. So first of all, there's two primary answers I have. One is that the federal government is not supposed to be involved in education. In our Constitution, education is left to the states. I don't believe that we should have a federal Secretary of Education. I believe that's a mistake that President Ronald Reagan made, and that we went along, or the officials went along with. The Constitution says it's a state issue. I'm a huge parent advocate, so I want the parents to decide what is best for their children. And that is why a lot of our parents today are removing children from school options that have been maybe even positive for them, bringing them home and controlling in a positive, imposing as family values what they think is best for their own kids. So those would be two things that I would look at. Do I think somebody should have a handle on this? Yes. Do I think that we want to be leaders in the world? Yes. So I see, and do I think ethics, accountability, morality? Yes. Do I think the federal government is where it should be? No.
Fair enough. I like that. I like that you just kind of dropped it there. That's really, I think, how many of us kind of feel. This is the design almost of the American experiment, is that we might never truly be satisfied with government, right? There's kind of that push and pull and that challenge, I think, that we kind of go through. That's okay. But I want to bring this now, kind of like you said, back to home a little bit. If a parent was going to step into this place where we're almost asking, this Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Communications and Information to now look at AI literacy and digital literacy and how we should kind of handle this, what should kind of maybe a family's kind of digital literacy ethic be? How should we teach digital decorum, maybe even in our home? What should some of the chief concepts be? What would you kind of say to a family or a mom and a dad that are looking at this and saying, man, everyone's coming up with an idea of what we should do. We should have it at home. Is that a wise thing for a family to do? And what would you say kind of a family should maybe have as like 3 or 4 bullet points to start off that conversation?
Yeah, I love that question, because whether your children are schooled at home or schooled in school, moms and dads are ultimately the authority that need to have a control of this. So things that I would be teaching is digital literacy is certainly discernment for your children. What is the source? Who is the source? Would we follow that person? Do they share our ethics and our values? What's the date of the information? I don't know if you can remember, Wayne, but I remember being back in school and trying to find something in the library that was current enough that I could use, as a research paper. And sometimes that was hard because books take a while to be published, et cetera. Now we have things that were written yesterday, and we still have things on the internet that are 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. And sometimes it matters. So are you teaching your kids that? And does it make life better? Let's ask the question, does this use of tech make you better? Does it make life better? Just because it's efficient, is that a high value all the time? I would want my kids to know if it's educational or entertaining. Just that, right? Did you like it because it was entertaining? Do you always need to be entertained? Did you like it because you learned something? Praise God. We're called to be learners in the scripture, so let's celebrate that. I would also look at things like other-centered, self-centered. Does it cause you to be self-centered, to fall into the screen? Or are you learning something that would cause you to be a better human being, serve better in the neighborhood, at school, and at church? And related to that, positive character versus negative character. As you know, I just wrote a whole book on character, and I chose a Baker's Dozen top 13, and I chose ones that are related to technology because technology will destroy our heart if we allow it to do so. So I would want my kids to discern, wouldn't it be great if a kid said, Mom, I can't use this game anymore. It's way too competitive and winning became way too important to me. And I felt like I had no compassion for the kids who lost. It just made me feel really unsafe inside myself. Mommy, take this game off my device. Come on, celebrate that.
As Dr. Kathy was closing down today, it made me think of a verse that comes out of Proverbs chapter 16, and I'm going to begin reading at verse 20. Whoever gives heed to instruction prospers, and blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. The wise in heart are called discerning, and gracious words promote instruction. Prudence is a fountain of life to the prudent, but folly brings punishment to fools. There's so many proverbs like this that just kind of speak some truth to us. And I think what Dr. Kathy talked about today really helps us process and think through the different realities that we're going to experience as we go on with parenting, especially in an artificial intelligent world. And in this, I think Dr. Kathy's instruction for us is to begin to build concepts and precepts and maybe even rhythms for our family on the design of the Lord, and looking at relationships as kind of a primary fundamental litmus test as we think about how technology impacts us and impacts our kids. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in this, our daily segment, Face in the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.